Going live in 5, 4, 3. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Daily Code, episode 17. I'm assertchris, or Chris, and I'm really excited to be back. I had a really good weekend. I hope you did too. I got a lot of cool code done, a lot of cool writing done, and I'm really excited because tonight we're going to look at some ReactJS stuff, which is pretty cool. We've been spending a lot of time doing PHP stuff and WebSockets and async servers and stuff in PHP, and that's all really cool, but I wanted to get back into ReactJS for a while, and there were some suggestions for doing build chain stuff this week, and I thought I'd start it off easily and get into pick up what we were doing last time with ReactJS, work in some CSS animations for it, which is pretty cool. So without further ado, let's do some code. Now, hold on, let me get chat up. There you go. Okay. Right, now, last time what we'd done was we'd set up a bunch of different components. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will load this up in a browser. I'll load this up in the browser so you can, just to remind you what we did. We're using the npm serve library here, so you can just install it with npm-i or npm-i -g serve or something, and that'll give you this command line thing that you can run, which will start up a local web server for hosting JavaScript stuff. Now, I only have 2 items in here, but what this is basically doing is it is a I'll just reseed this quickly. This is a kind of like a page admin for, like, you can think of it like a CMS editing area, and this is a list of all the pages managed by the CMS, and each of these can be edited and will reflect in the rest of the UI, and all of this is done using ReactJS, which is pretty fun. But last time I did this, and then I moved on to plugging Eris WebSockets into this to use that as a data store, and that was really fun, but I don't really want to manage that all right now. I want to make quite a few changes to this tonight. So, earlier today, I went and I created a separate backend which uses local storage. So, in case you're unfamiliar, there is this thing on the window object called local storage, which is kind of like a session store. It's not exactly like a session store because there's a thing called session store, but it's like cookies 2.0. You can store data in it, you can get data out of it, but where cookies is just a plain old string storage, local storage is actually pretty intense. You can store a lot more data. So some browsers, and of course this varies wildly from browser to browser and from version to version, but you can store anything in the region of 3 megs to 10 megs by default in browsers in local storage, and compare that to cookies, which I tested earlier. Chrome, the same version that gives me 10 megs of storage on Chrome, gives me 4,000 bytes of storage in cookies. It's also a pain to work with the cookies as well. So anyway, local storage is just a really cool store that you can use to persist data. It'll survive through page reloads, it'll survive through closing the browser and opening it again. It's specific to the origin, which is pretty cool. And I created this object, again using ES6 because I've got that live reload thing going on. I created this object as kind of a proxy to the local storage. So the way that this is used, I'll jump to where it's used and then we'll see. The implementation of this is in backend. So the way that it's used is we import this thing, and then we say local store get, and this is a key for whatever data is stored there, and we can give a default value. So in this case I'm saying, okay, get the array of pages out of local store, but if it's not there, just give me an empty array. Okay. The way that we set things is to say local store set, and again we give a key and we give some JavaScript value, and the local store facade thing that I've got here, or proxy thing that I've got here, will store these JSON encoded and retrieve them and JSON decode them so that we can put quite complex data structures in there, and it'll just store them relatively safely within local storage, and we have a really nice API to do this with. which is really cool because it means we can take a step back and not use sockets immediately. You know, if we don't want to have that server running in the background, we can just use local storage for this stuff, and it's kind of like a fake storage for us because we can refresh the browser and we can close the browser and open it up again, and it'll still be there. But it also means that we can't host this anywhere because people are going to see their own data. They're not going to see the data that you put in. So it's good for just testing the functionality locally, and we can switch to a socket implementation or an Ajax implementation later if we want to, which is really cool. Now I have some other stuff. I mean, all of this stuff is, I've been debugging this quite a bit, and I kind of don't want to delete that. But basically how this is created is we create a new page admin object. And if you remember from last time, the structure of this is that there is a top level page admin which lists all of the pages and has methods to update them, to delete them. It creates a few page components, and these page components compose an editor and a list view. So I've just called those page editor and page view. The editor, as you can probably guess, is a form. So there are some inputs, and as these change, the pages change. And the view is just a static view with buttons to edit and to delete. So this is exactly the same structure as we had before. I've just retrofitted the backend to use local storage instead of sockets for the purposes of the stream tonight. And the idea is that I dig into doing animation with this, but this exposes a little bit of a problem with the setup that I have here. If you remember, right at the beginning, what I did was I seeded this storage. I basically said, okay, override whatever's in local storage, set it to an encoded version of this array. Wow, what have I just done? Set it to an encoded version of this array. Return div. KDEX. This is JSX. It's a JavaScript superset language created by Facebook, which gets converted to... The equivalent that this gets converted to for ES5, for browser compatibility, is something like React DOM with, I don't know, with some content and properties. So I guess we could say like React DOM and then an array of React, sorry, not React DOM, React DOM div. And then the input will be like React DOM input. It looks pretty weird, but it's a way to do shorthand for those React DOM components. And I mean, this is going to look weird if this is the first time you've seen JSX or ReactJS stuff. But essentially, React components, React's a UI rendering library, first and foremost, and you make these components and they have this render method, and then whatever this render method returns is the markup that this component generates. So right in the beginning you say render this, and then this component composes others, you know, in a big nested tree, just like you may be familiar with HTML and JavaScript DOM in browsers usually. But what this will do is it will determine what markup to render from this, and it will put it inside this element. So it looks weird, but you'll get used to it soon enough. That's ReactJS. Okay, so we create this page admin object. It contains however many pages we have in our data store. These load editors or views depending on which mode they're in. And what we're left with is an interface that looks like this, which takes a little while to load, but where we can make these kinds of updates. And what's interesting is we can make these kinds of updates and they just work very well depending on the data stores that we have. So I'll illustrate this. Because I've got this local store backing the interface of this, I can edit one thing, and the back end is event driven, and so when I do this kind of thing, it actually should update, but it kind of didn't. There's probably a reference error there, or at least local stores duplicated for different tabs, maybe? I don't know. I'll figure that out. Anyway, with the sockets example, we could update the one and all the browsers would update for that because it was event-based the way that I set it up. Okay, So I was talking about the error that this exposes. Right in the beginning, I had to seed this local store with some data. Now, I don't want to put WebSockets in. I don't think it's a bug so much as it's just how it's implemented. It's not going to share that state from multiple windows. I don't know. I mean, I guess the way that you could see this is if let me drag this tab out. I mean, I think page reloads might do the trick. So it's not real-time data, but it is. Yeah. Okay. So it's just the references to the event listeners that aren't being fired, which is fine. Do you see what happened there? So I updated the one, and it updates the local store data. It's just event listener references. It's not really a bug. It's just implementation stuff. Anyway, the problem that I was talking about was that I had to see this data in the beginning because there is no elegant way to add new items. We can delete them and it will persist that, but we can't add new items because we don't have any UI to do that. So I thought we could make some UI to do that. That seemed like a fun idea. So, the first place I guess we could do this, we have this backend that is backed with local storage as I've been talking about, and we have a method to get all the pages, which is pretty simple, and a method to update them. So this goes through each of the pages and applies updates and then overwrites the pages and sets that in the local store and emits an event. Pretty simple. Delete is even easier. What I think we need to do is we need to have a create method here. And, let's see. We can have a create method here. We probably need to have some kind of internal ID set up for this. Okay, so create, we'll just say make a new, we'll just call this method to make a new item. We probably want to have a properties array or an attributes or whatever we want to call that for the keys and values of this thing that we create. Or maybe what we can even do is we can say, we just call this create method directly, and it puts this page in an edit mode. We can do something like that. Okay, so create. What do we want to do then? This page is push, and we'll just push an empty object in here. So something like it has an ID with null. Well, I mean, do we really want to do that? Maybe what we can do is we can say this ID is this page's length, just to begin with. I mean, it's kind of crude to do it this way because we don't know that those IDs are sequential in local store. But, you know, I mean, we can work it out. We can work it out. I mean, maybe what we do is we say something like var pages equals this, and then we can say this pages is pages map using ES6 arrow functions. We can do something like this, and then we can say, okay, page ID is this ID plus return page. So we're giving pages new IDs the whole time. We're re-indexing them. Now we can say, okay, we'll set this ID is 0, or in fact 1, I guess we can say. So ID starts at 1. All of the pages are indexed, getting an incremental ID. And then the next time we create a page, we can say, okay, ID is this page, this ID plus. Title we can just give as a blank string. Body we can just give, body we can just give, I did it again. Body we can just give as a blank string. Okay. Now, just like we've got events being emitted on update, when pages are updated and when they're deleted, we also want to emit this event when pages are created because we want to update the view for these pages, right? In fact, let's even give this a generic title like new page. New page. Then they'll all be created with that name by default and we can edit it as we wish. So we add this new page. We probably want to store the pages in local store so that when we reload the page, it has these new records in it. And finally, we emit the event. So now, this isn't really going to change what we've got going on here because we have no UI to edit this. We have no UI to add new items to this. What we probably want to do is make a new make a new component for this. It's probably not a component that's going to update with properties that are already here. So I'm not quite sure what we do about that. Whether we duplicate this component. No, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. I'll tell you what we do. We've got our page admin here, right? Let's just put a new element in here. We can say something like, okay, render div for this whole thing and close this div out. Okay, so we've got our list of pages here, but let's have a new div here. Well, I guess we don't need the nesting, but anyway, let's go to the page view and let's copy this button back to page admin. No, we don't need that div there, but we'll say, okay, this props on page. No, we don't need props for this. This handle page create. Well, we have this insert method there. I don't think we need that insert method. Handle page create. Okay. I'll just change this method name here because it's an old, unused one. So, does this button appear? Dun dun dun! It does. It says delete, which is probably wrong. Create new page. Everyone with me so far? Any questions so far? Okay, create new page. What does this do? Well, it says time to insert a page, but what we want to do now that we've got this method on here is we want to say something like this: props backend create. Oops. And now look up here in the constructor, I have an event emitter on here. This is probably not the best way to bind this, because if this component gets removed, this event listener is still going to be here. But I don't really want to solve the potential memory leak in this area right now, because it's kind of meh. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay, so we're calling this props back in create. Let's see if that makes a new record. Create new. It does. Check that out. That's making new pages, and there's persisted page reload, I'm pretty sure of it. And we can edit one of these to say, okay, burning baskets. And that's updated and persisted. Which is pretty cool, I think. I think that's pretty cool. Now these are all getting unique IDs, and each time they're loaded in from local store, and they're getting re-indexed when they get loaded in. So it maintains the order, because after a new page is added or a page is updated or deleted, it sets that value back in local store. But they're getting re-indexed the whole time, which I don't think is the biggest problem. It's not that much of a problem. Also, I have a console log here somewhere which I want to try and get rid of because it's quite annoying. Page, is it in here? Dum dum dum. Yes. Let's get rid of these console logs because we don't need them. We know this is working. Okay, so this should update, and it should store that, and it should be working fine. Yeah, that's awesome. That's super awesome. Okay, now the animation that I wanted to do requires... Well, there are a few things we can do for animation. Oh, no, G-Sound. Those are from... What I've done is I've downloaded a... through NPM I've downloaded a thing called Event Emitter 3. It's from GitHub. It's this thing. So I downloaded this. You can download it, you can install it through NPM or through component.bar. And what that does is that creates this dependency in the node modules folder. But how to load that in? I've got this special like live demo React workbench thing going on. Wow, what a glowing recommendation. I've got this thing called React Starter. I'll put a link to it in chat. And this is like a live workbench. You can clone this and you can start making React components, and it will load this in dynamically. So it loads this in first off, but you can just import other components that you've written and you can render them, and then that, you know, that lets you do it live, so you can do ES6 code. So what I've done is I've taken this live loading thing and I've loaded the event emitter in there. I've just given it a temporary namespace. So this is the namespace in this example that I will import from, and that references the ES6 version of this event emitter 3. So if we look in node modules, event emitter, oh, lots of stuff in here. Event emitter 3 index.js. This defines like a meta class, a meta JavaScript class that I can inherit from. And if you look over at, if we take a look over at backend, when I create the backend class, I just extend event emitter. So those are methods that come from event emitter, but the backend, you know, the backend acts as an event emitter to emit specifically just the event when the pages are updated. Hopefully that was clear. It didn't sound very clear coming out my mouth, but anyway. So the animation that I wanted to start off with was the ReactJS animation. What this does is it allows you to specify this custom element and to give it like a special CSS animation class set name, and you render React items in here like a list of items, like our page list, so that when a new item is added or removed, that transition happens. It applies these CSS classes and animations to items that are added and items that are removed, which is pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. And I want to use this. But another problem is that the way that I've set this up, I have to download a standalone distribution of React for this example stuff to work, because I haven't installed it through npm. So what I'll have to do is download this again, because I need an alias React with add-ons. This animation stuff is in React with add-ons. So I'll download that. It's a good time to update the version that I've got locally anyway, to 14.2, 0.14.2. Wow, all this stuff. Okay, build. React with add-ons, React DOM, React. I'll just take all of these and I don't know if I'll use them all, but anyway. React CMS, examples. Cool. Okay, so let's replace those. I think what I can do now is I can say examples React with add-ons. I think that'll work. Now let me just check that this base code works, the stuff that I've been working with so far. I can delete. Yay! Then I can update, and it stores that from session to session. Okay, and it's loading React with add-ons. That's really good. So maybe what I can do now is use this CSS transition group element in this whole thing. Let's see, let's go to page admin. Now the pages are loaded through an array here. So what we want to do through a map there. So what we want to do is take the, let's go back to animation and copy this out. So it'll be something like that, and then the closing element below this map. And I'll just work the indentation out so that it is perhaps a little easier to see. Okay, so you make this React CSS transition group, and this is the first time I'm trying this today, so this may not work initially, but anyway, you make the React CSS transition group, you give it a transition name. This relates to the CSS classes that we use for animation. So I'll keep an example for now, and I'll use the exact same CSS animation classes as are defined here, because I want this to work first time. Okay, we do that, and then we have to put some CSS in here. So I think this can go, wow, what is with this indentation? It's pretty weird. I think this can go in our index.html file. I'll just put it in the head, because performance, hey? Alright. Okay, let's indent this, because we don't have more important things to do with our time. Okay, it appears that these millisecond values correspond with the millisecond values in this transition group. So leave timeout is 300 milliseconds, leave 300 milliseconds. I wonder if that's a pattern that they have to match up. Does it say anywhere? Oh, okay. It says that right underneath there, so okay. Interesting. Okay, let's have a look what this looks like. We can refresh this. And CSS transition group is not defined. Okay, we're not actually importing that. So maybe I need to do something like this. Something like that. I mean, will that even work? Also, maybe I have to import it in index as well. This is a pretty weird setup. You don't usually have to import this thing twice, or in a different scope or anything, but I think I have to just because of the live reload environment I have. Hopefully that works. Create element of undefined. Well, that's certainly interesting. I don't know what's going on with that. So I'll just search for this reference in this file. It's totally defined there. Oh, React add-ons. Okay, I don't need that. I'll tell you what we do. We won't import it separately. Let's go to here and let's just import React again. But what we will do is in page admin, we'll say React add-ons CSS transition group, because we're already importing React. And we can use these namespaces, I'm pretty sure. So let's refresh and see if that works. No! Okay, type should be not be null, undefined boolean, or number, it should be string. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to try and figure this out in the next few minutes, but I do want to take a break and get some water, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see you in 2 minutes.